Local governments strive day in and day out to provide essential services and foster a high quality of life in their communities. Plans are developed and prioritized before being financed and put into action. Nowhere is this better illustrated than in a city's budget process. Dubuque's budget process spans the entire year, beginning with the City Council goals and priorities as elected officials, city staff, and local citizens work together to meet the community's needs. Hi, I'm Randy Gale, and today I'm joined by Budget Director Jenny Larson. We'll talk about the budget process and show the many ways in which residents can get involved. Thanks for being with us today, Jenny.
Thanks, Randy. I'm happy to be here.
Well, let's start out with a few basic points about the city's budget. First of all, what is the city's fiscal year? Because it's not the calendar year, correct?
Correct. The city's fiscal year actually starts on July 1st of each year, and it ends on June 30th.
Okay. And just to give our viewers some context, how large is the city's annual budget?
The city's budget is about $200 million.
Okay. But now that is divided, that's a total that is split between a operating budget and a capital budget. Maybe explain the difference between those two and approximately what the split is between those two different types of budgets.
Sure. The capital budget is about $80 million, and then the operating budget in round numbers is about $120 million. The operating budget is the day-to-day activities of running the city and providing services to citizens. So it's employee expense, supplies and services, and some small equipment replacements like vehicles. The capital budget is larger items for capital projects such as the asphalt milling program, the annual street program, keeping city facilities updated, and other projects such as like economic development projects and other projects that are over $10,000.
Okay. And so we have the operating budget and the capital budget, but within that there's also different budget categories, right, that the city uses to organize these funds and expenses, correct?
Yes, the state has mandated what they call programs that we have to budget under. So the programs are public safety, so that would be obviously fire and police. There's health and social services, which would be health services and human rights. Culture and recreation, which park and rec and library would fall under. Economic development, which obviously economic development also housing falls under that one. Then there's general government, where the administrative services of the city fall, like city manager's office, city council, city clerk. Business type activities, which is where our enterprise activities fall, like parking and sanitary. And then there's debt service and also transfers.
Okay. So of those different budget categories, what are the top three that require the most funding?
The top three would be public safety, public works, and then general government.
And can you tell us a little bit more about what general government means, what services would fall under that category?
Sure. General government would be comprised of the administrative functions of the city, so the city manager's office, planning services, city clerk's office, finance, information services, public information, personnel, budget, those types of services.
Okay. And you said these are state mandated categories. Are there additional state regulations that regulate how the city allocates funds to those individual categories? In other words, are the city's hands somewhat tied in how funds are distributed among those different categories?
They do not specifically mandate how much funding goes to each program. However, with public safety, for example, we have a certain number of firefighters and sworn officers, so we have to allocate appropriate funding to be able to keep those levels. Basically, it's based on what the city can afford based on the approved level of budget.
Okay. And obviously when you talk about a budget, you're looking at revenues and expenses. So let's start out with talking about the city's revenues. What are the main sources of revenue for the city?
The city has several sources of revenue. The biggest one that people would think of is local tax revenue. That is comprised of property taxes, local option sales tax, hotel motel tax, road use tax, and then we get some gaming taxes from the casinos here in Dubuque. And then second to that, we do debt issuances or borrowings for capital projects. We do not issue debt for any of our operations, but with the amount of capital projects the city is doing, we have been doing some substantial borrowings. In addition to that, we do have operating receipts generated by our departments through like licenses and permits and various fees, for example, like the ambulance fees and fees charged at the airport. Other revenues would be state and federal funding, and that could come through grants, or we also get federal transportation dollars, federal aviation dollars, and as I mentioned, we have road use taxes coming from the state. And then other than that, we have various miscellaneous things like land sales, we have leases from property, and those sorts of revenues.
And speaking of property taxes, when people pay their property taxes, all that money does not go to the City of Dubuque, right? There are several different taxing bodies in Dubuque that receive a portion of those property tax revenues. What are those taxing bodies, and how are those revenues split up?
Sure. The taxing bodies that it's distributed to is there's the Dubuque Community School District, so they receive the biggest portion of taxes. Then the City of Dubuque. There's also the county that receives a portion. Area schools, which includes Northeast Iowa Community College. And then there's kind of a miscellaneous category that includes the county hospital or Sunnycrest, city assessor, county assessor, and the Dubuque County Ag Extension.
Okay. Let's talk about timeline a little bit. I mentioned in the introduction that the budget process is a 12-month long process. That process is somewhat regulated by the state, correct? There are some state mandates regarding when we go through this budget process?
Yes, the state law requires we adopt a budget by March 15th, so we have to plan our calendar accordingly to be able to get everything submitted, reviewed, and recommended to City Council.
Well, with that March 15 deadline in mind, explain how the city gets there. What happens each month or each time of year to make sure that we're able to meet that deadline every spring?
Sure. The city actually starts its budget process in August, and it starts with the City Council goal setting. So prior to the City Council holding their goal setting, the city manager and department managers get together to review prior year accomplishments and things that they view as challenges, and those are shared with the City Council. Then the City Council holds a 3-day goal setting with an outside facilitator. And through that process, they set a vision and mission statement, the 5-year goals, and then the policy agenda and management agenda. And then after that is set, we'll start the actual budget process with departments. Beginning in September, departments will submit their capital improvement projects, so things that are needed in their departments capital-wise. And after those are submitted, they are reviewed by myself and the city manager. And then in October, departments work with their operating budgets and submit those. And it goes through the same review process through myself and the city manager. And then in November, we typically have a public input session with the city manager where the public can come for an informal meeting to talk about any budget concerns or give input for what they would like to see in the budget. And then in December, we put together what's called a budget policy guidelines. So it's a roadmap of what the City Council can expect to be included in the recommended budget. It gives a summary of some of the issues we're facing with expenses and revenues. And then it typically provides a property tax projection for the taxpayers, and then that, after it's reviewed by City Council, is adopted. And then in January is when we're balancing the budget, the city manager and myself. So we balance the 5-year CIP, and then we're balancing the operating budget, determining if we're able to fund any improvement level packages, which would increase a department's level of service. And then once that is balanced, then the recommended budget documents are put together, which include the policy document, the 5-year capital improvement program, and the citizens guide. And then that is brought to typically the first meeting in February to City Council. So it's submitted to them then. And then we start meetings, public meetings with City Council, and those go through February and March until we have the final public hearing to adopt the budget prior to March 15th.
Okay. And I know within that budget the departments work on, there are maintenance level items and improvement level items. Can you distinguish the difference between those and how those are reviewed or how they're developed, I guess?
Sure. The maintenance level items are basically the service level that they've been providing. So it's not an increase in staff, same level of staff. They're working with the same amount of equipment that they've worked with in the past, and same level of supplies that they've been purchasing and that sort of thing. If they decide to submit improvement level, it could be they may request additional staffing because they may want to, for example, be open longer hours or do something different within their operations. They could also request additional equipment if they think it will make their operations more efficient. It could be new software if there's new technology out or new software that would help them perform their work.
Okay. And when you're explaining the timeline, you talked about the public input meeting. Let's talk about different opportunities, or all the opportunities, I should say, that the public has to provide input to city staff and elected officials about the budget. Obviously, residents are welcome and encouraged to contact city staff and elected officials anytime about any issue. But there's some work being done on the process specifically related to providing input on the budget. Talk a little bit about how that process is changing, or what the goal is in making these changes.
Sure. We have actually been seeking some community input on how to change the process to get more people involved. So this past year or so, we've been going out in the community and trying to get some of the ideas of how to increase that. And one of the ideas has been to actually go out into the community to where the people are. So we are changing it to where we'll do some meetings with neighborhood groups, for example, downtown. And then the general public input meeting that we've always held with the city manager, we're looking at changing the location from being in the city council chambers to somewhere more informal. For example, it may be the Multicultural Family Center, it could be in the library. So just try to change the venue to get more people to attend and give more opportunities for people to attend.
And so at these sessions, can you talk a little bit about the format? What, if people do attend one, what might they expect? Are they just going to be an opportunity for them to just say what they think, or is there going to be some context or background on the budget provided?
Yes, there will be some context provided. The city manager will share some of the council goals and priorities, since that is a baseline for the budget. The process in the meeting will actually go through some group activities where to get people brainstorming about what they see as city needs as individual or family level, a neighborhood level, and then citywide level. And then we would have them in groups prioritize the brainstorming that they've done and share with the overall group.
And now sometimes I know, based on past budgets, sometimes people are very passionate about one issue and they come and they share their thoughts on that. What about people who want to take a deeper dive into the available information? Because like everything the city does, the budget documents are available to the public throughout the year. So what about residents who want to really take a comprehensive look at the budget, really go into detail? There's documents available, hard copies and digital copies. How might they access those?
Sure, they're available on the city's website on the budget page, and the documents are all posted there. So it includes the 5-year CIP, the policy guidelines, and the citizens guide. So they can read the entire documents there. There's also videos posted on there of how the process works and just overall information on how the budget process works. The actual hard copies of budget documents are available for checkout at the reference desk in the library, and there's also a set in the city clerk's office in City Hall. And by request, we can provide them on CD for viewing at home.
I've seen these documents before. They're voluminous. Let's say if you looked at the entire package, how big of a pile of binders would it be talking about?
In total, it's 8 volumes of documents. There's 6 volumes for the policy guidelines, and the capital project volume is significantly large, but the Citizens Guide is much smaller and easily understandable.
That's what I was just going to ask about, because certainly want people to be overwhelmed, think they have to wade through all that information. Maybe tell us a little bit more about what the Citizens Guide is and how it's different from all the other volumes that you have to produce.
The Citizens Guide is meant to be a summary of all of the budget, what is included in the city's budget. So it's a lot of graphics, narratives, summaries that are meant to be easily understandable by anyone who picks the book up to try to get an understanding of the budget. It's much more condensed, I would say, and it's organized in a way that if you're interested in a specific thing, it's easy. You can easily find it in the document.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the recommended budget now, because that's something that you spend the majority of your time on, obviously, is preparing those budget recommendations. How detailed is it? What does it consist of? You talked about that a little bit, but I guess just to summarize how the recommended budget fits into the process.
The recommended budget is very detailed. For example, the policy budget is all of the department's budgets, and it includes a summary of their expenses and revenues, an explanation of any significant variances of revenue and expenditures. It includes reports that actually show all of their line items in both revenue and expense, and then it shows their performance measures. So departments are measuring certain things to tell their stories and show what kind of impact that they have on the community. That's also included in that document. Then the 5-year capital improvement program, it will show all of the individual projects, and each project has a separate project sheet. So it's typically a 500-page document, but if you're interested in a particular project, you can go to that document and get the information you're looking for. And then, of course, the Citizens Guide we already talked about. It's a summary of all of that information.
So then, just to summarize, the city departments and divisions create their budget request for the upcoming fiscal year. They submit those to you and the city manager. You look at all those requests from all those departments. You compare them to the city council goals and priorities and try to prioritize how we're going to fund these programs. The city manager then finalizes the recommended budget. It's presented to the city council in January. What's the next step of the process, again, just to review?
The next step then is there's a series of 6 public meetings held with city council on the budget. And in those meetings, each department is scheduled to present to the city council what is included in their budget and various items that they would be interested in their budget. After each department presents, then the city council can ask questions about what they've seen in the budget documents. And then there's also an opportunity for the public to address city council on any questions or concerns they have on each department.
Okay. Now, the city's rates and fees, property tax rates, utility fees, those are all determined as part of the budget process as well. How are those decisions made in terms of whether rates stay the same or increased or decreased? Talk a little bit about that, please.
Sure. Property taxes are reviewed as we review departments' budget requests, and also we look at estimating over 5 years our projected revenue and expenses. And so then we determine what property tax rate is needed, and we look at the impact to the average homeowner and decide, what kind of increase can happen or not happen, and make that a recommendation to city council. The other fees that are considered would be the water user fee, the sanitary user fee, stormwater user fees, parking fees for the enterprise funds. And most of those funds we actually have reviewed by our financial advisor, a third-party person who takes a look at it and projects out our revenues and expenses and determines how much we need We have some requirements with debt we have issued where we have to meet a certain net income each year in those funds, such as the water, sanitary, and stormwater funds. So that person takes that into consideration, and we determine then what each rate increase has to be based on that information.
So the different departments and divisions that get revenue from these rates and fees, I believe they're all enterprise funds, correct me if I'm wrong, but do they all need to be self-sustaining?
Yes, what we consider enterprise funds, so they're the business type activities like water, sanitary, solid waste, stormwater, and parking. They have to be self-supporting, and they do not receive any property tax funding. So every year we have to look at that and determine, is their rate at a level where they can be self-supporting and meet all their requirements.
Okay. So you've got the challenge of making all this meeting all the requirements, legal requirements of this process in terms of being audited and things like that, being very detailed, but you also have the challenge of making this material understandable for people like me who don't have a great understanding of accounting and average citizens. There are some standards for that through the GFOA. Maybe talk about what GFOA stands for and how the city's been recognized recently and in the past for those efforts.
Sure. GFOA stands for Government Finance Officers Association, and the city is a member of that association, and it gives us the benefit of having peers that we can get information from. And then they also offer an awards program for the budget. It's called the GFOA Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. The city has been fortunate to apply and receive this award for the past 10 consecutive years. And we submit our budget documents based on certain criteria that they have and require. And then our budget documents are reviewed by 3 reviewers that are members of GFOA, and we're rated on our documents. And they have significant criteria that we have to meet, and every year we're improving our budget documents to be more understandable by both internal users in the city and also our citizens, and we're meeting high standards for what our budget documents include.
Well, congratulations on receiving that recognition for so many consecutive years. And we talked about this process and deadlines, but now there also comes there is occasionally the need to change the budget during the fiscal year, correct? How does that work? To what extent can it be changed? Why would it be changed after you've gone through this 12-month process to create this budget?
Actually, the budget is always changing because obviously when we adopt it, it's based on estimates, and then sometimes things don't kind of come to what we thought they would be, or something unexpected happens. So one of the things we cannot change after adoption is the property tax rate. So once that is set and adopted by March 15th, that remains the same for the entire year. However, we are able to change other things like, for example, if we get an unexpected grant, we can amend for that to allow spending of that grant. Sometimes we may have to do cuts, which we've had to do in the past few years because our revenues are less than projected. So we'll have to decide where we're going to make those cuts to be able to still come in on budget. Other changes may happen where maybe in the water, sanitary, sewer fund, we are in need of changing their rate. We can adjust the utility rates throughout the year by just city council amending the ordinance.
Okay. You talked about having a balanced budget. Maybe that's something we should emphasize too. Does the city have to have a balanced budget every year? And a second thought to explain maybe is, what role does the city's debt play into the budget development process? I guess that's kind of a 2-part question, but.
Okay. Yes, the city is required by state law to have a balanced budget. So we're not like the federal government where they have a deficit. We are always adopting a balanced budget and adjusting our budget throughout the year to make sure that it stays balanced. When we look at if we're going to issue debt, again, it's part of balancing the 5-year capital improvement program. So we are looking at the amount of resources we have and the projects that we absolutely have to do. And sometimes the projects are so large that it's just not feasible to be able to fund them with the cash balance that we have. And then we'll work with our financial advisor to come up with a borrowing plan for some of those projects and determine, the length, the term of the debt, and the best way to finance those projects.
And what about cash reserves? You just referenced that a little bit. Explain what those are and how the city uses a cash reserve.
Sure. We have many different cash reserves. The biggest one is in our general fund, so the fund where the property tax dollars go. We do have a policy on fund reserves, and our general fund reserve policy is a minimum of 10% of our operating expenses. However, we are trying to increase that to a more 20% level, but we'll have to do that over time. And that specifically is due to our credit rating agency for our debt wanting to see a higher general fund reserve balance. We also have reserves in our enterprise funds or business type funds, so water, sanitary, stormwater, solid waste collection, parking. They also have a 10% operating expense reserve that we keep in those funds in case something unexpected happens and we would need to pay for those things.
Okay. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today with this topic. It's a very complicated issue, the budget is. Is there anything you'd like to emphasize or reiterate in terms of maybe misperceptions that people may have about the budget or frequently asked questions that you may get from people?
I guess I would just like to emphasize that we would like citizen involvement in the process and your input in the process. And there are all kinds of ways to get the information from the budget. As it was mentioned, you can get the documents off the city's website. You can find out about upcoming budget meetings on the website. And you can also sign up for Notify Me to find out whenever budget documents are posted that can be reviewed.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today. And thank you for watching City Channel Dubuque.